So this is about the transaction process, how you can prepare and know ahead of time of what you need to do and how you can help your client, but also how can you make it through a transaction? That's when we're really earning our commission. This is when we really show our value. Having a consultation, showing homes, that's a fun part. Writing and negotiating offers, that's a fun part as well. But this is where we really roll up our sleeves and make sure that our clients make it to settlement, get their keys, and move into the house that they want to get. So, ultra important that you know this because uh, it's important to make sure that we're representing our clients appropriately, right? There's an integrity to this process. And if you feel like you need more knowledge, spend more time with the material, spend more time with each aspect of this to really get to know it. You want to be the expert and invest the time. This is a transaction timeline. We're going to go over this, and this is a bit of a cheat sheet to help you out. The first 24 hours, what happens now that we're ratified? What are we doing with inspections and the earnest money deposit? The first 10 days, typically that is when there is an inspection and the buyer is deciding, do I want to negotiate repairs or maybe not follow through with this transaction? The middle of the transaction days through 11-15. Typically, we are negotiating some repairs day 16 through 27. This is when we're ordering the appraisal, maybe documents regarding a homeowners association. There's a title search that's ongoing, lots of work. And then in the last few days, really honing in on settlement, going to this home one more time to make sure repairs are done and hopefully obtaining keys at closing. So it's important to remember what your role is here, right? You're not a salesperson. You are a representative. You have your clients back at all times, and you are there to help them. So as much as we want a sale, we got to remember that we're guiding them in the right direction. This is a process with integrity and representation. Your buyers will make emotional decisions when they're purchasing a home. So you need to make sure that you are keeping your emotions clear and that you're balanced and in touch with the process throughout. Sometimes real estate transactions, or I should say most times, they're problematic. And we are problem solvers. And we have a great opportunity to show our value and help agents through this process. So even if you don't have a lot of transactions, you could be well planned ahead as to what comes next and what might come up. So if you're always 3, 4, 5 steps ahead of your buyer, you're going to be able to help them through the process. And when in doubt, ask. We have brokers, leaders, mentors, you name it, other agents that are super helpful. Someone is here to help you figure things out. Now, I believe a great transaction starts at the consultation and through preparation of your client. So set the right expectations. You want to talk about financing because you want to make sure that not only is your buyer pre-approved with the lender, but you want to make sure that they're prepared. Do they have a down payment if they need that? Do they have a few extra funds for earnest money deposit for an appraisal or anything else that may come up? And then also their monthly payment. They may be pre-approved to 500,000, but maybe don't want to pay more than $3,000 a month. So you want to make sure you're shopping the right price range and also preparing and briefly being able to explain some of the things that will be ahead, like earnest money deposit when you're making an offer, the home inspection and appraisal that's a cost to buyers. You want to make sure that you let them know that there are a few things that could slow down the transaction and they need to be interactive. Most times, the negotiation and completion of repairs, if we're taking a long time negotiating repairs, and we'll get to the part of the transaction that we do that, that could slow down a time that we close. You remember the seller is possibly moving out, the buyer is moving their entire life into this home. They have expectations of closing on time. They don't do this every day, and they don't know the things that could bog down the transaction, such as your client getting documents into the lender. There's going to be a number of things that they're going to ask for. They're going to ask for bank statements and W-2s, possibly tax forms, and other types of documents or letters known as conditions. We're going to approve this loan except for these conditions that need to be met. And a lot of buyers will take it personally. They'll say, I've got an 800 credit score. Why are they asking me for this again? And it's nothing personal. If a mortgage lender is going to hand over anywhere from 200,000, 500,000, $800,000, they want to make sure they're doing it right. And I would say that would be fair, right? So everybody goes through the same sort of approval process through underwriters to make sure that the lender is making a safe bet. So you want to make sure that you let them know it's not personal, it's part of the process. Let's not complain, let's interact, let's help out those lenders. So you want to make sure that during this consultation that you're coaching them, because buyers typically will have some of the same sort of beliefs that every house is overpriced, that same as buying a car from a car lot that you don't pay sticker because you got to negotiate it down, or they'll write lowball offers, or they'll ask for way too many seller concessions, closing dates that are too far off. Typically, transactions are closing in about 30 days, but if they want to close 3 months from now, that's going to be very difficult, if not impossible. So how do we handle this? Well, we share comparable sales to let them know that a listing agent is doing their research before they put a home on the market to make sure it's competitively priced and something that will appraise. Because if it is financed, an appraiser will evaluate the property to see if it's worth what's on the contract. Why waste everybody's time? But in our next session, where we're making offers, we're actually going to see how, when we're representing a buyer, we can also look at comparables to make sure that we are heading in the right direction with our buyer with an offer. What about the condition of the home? A lot of buyers will say that they want to take the responsibility of a fixer upper. Oh, hey, I'll do that to myself. But, you know, there's a lot of buyers out there that really don't want to do a lot of work. So we need to make sure that we're really looking at homes that are truly going to pass their loan type and the type of home that they want to live in. So we want to make sure that, we're looking for a win-win solution when we're making these offers. So again, at the consultation, this is something where education will help you have a great transaction. So I'm going to go to the home buyer's guide, which is available in the marketing portal. And I just want to briefly go over how you can summarize a transaction, not only in your own mind, but for a buyer. Not every time are we sitting down having a consultation that's in the office. Now, I would say that's the best place. If you're sitting in an office, in a conference room, and you're going over the home buying process, you have full attention, you're able to spend time with it and really educate that buyer. Sometimes it's on the go. It could be an online setting like this. It could be at a coffee shop, right? Sometimes it could be a scaled down version at a house that we're showing, like in the kitchen or something like that. So if you are able to explain the buyer process to a client, whether it's in long form or short form, you're going to win more clients and you're going to win trust and they're going to see the value that you have. So the home buyer guide scales down the explanation a little bit. Number one, finding an agent, right? A trusted person like you that's going to guide them through the process. Number two, a pre-approval. You want to make sure that your buyer can afford the homes that they're going to look at, with a trusted, reputable lender. Local is better because they're going to understand the local nuances of our transactions, and also listing agents are going to have more confidence in your offer when you're presenting a pre-approval letter from a lender that they recognize or they can get in contact with, or that is local. So you want to make sure that you're shopping within their price range. And then number three, finding their home. That's where you come in, right? They're going to do their own searches on Zillow, Realtor.com, Homes.com. A good portion of those homes could be under contract. The multiple listing service is your resource to be able to find homes that are not under contract, that fit in their criteria and their price range, so you can arrange appointments to go view these homes. Now, number four, we're getting ready to make an offer. We want to make sure that we're writing an offer that's reasonable. We've done our research based on local market data. What's the home's condition? How long it's been on the market? What is the financial goals of your buyer? And this is where we will help them and where an earnest money deposit would come in. Number five, getting a home inspection and appraisal. The home inspection is something that we help arrange and guide them through to make sure that they're getting a house in good condition. The appraisal is something that's ordered by the bank. Now, this could be at a cost. A home inspection could be anywhere from $350 to $450 for your buyer, paid at time of service. Why is it paid at time of service? Because not all homes close, right? So, based on the condition, so you want to make sure that they prepare some funds in advance. Same thing with an appraisal. There are some lenders who cover the cost of appraisal. Most times it's at the cost of a buyer when it's being ordered by the lender. Tell them to save another $600 and have that ready to go. All right, let's finish with a win. Number six, closing. After the appraisal, the repairs, and the loan approval, we get a chance to see the home one more time with a final walkthrough, make sure those repairs are done. This is when we are signing paperwork to close on the home. You're handing them keys and a chance to move in, most likely right away. So this again is from the Home Buyer's Guide. If you're in the marketing portal, if you look under new branding and presentations, this is where you'll be able to find this resource. I highly suggest you download it and familiarize yourself with it and have it ready and share it with buyers as well to show that, hey, there's a lot I do. This is what you do need an agent, and I can't wait to help you through that process. Let's talk a little bit about who's who in the transaction, because you're going to hear a few references to some that are helping us through this process. Well, the lender, it's a mortgage lender. You might have heard like loan officer and mortgage specialist. They have a bunch of names. So please don't call them a loan officer just because it's kind of an older term and it certainly sounds intimidating. Lender, mortgage specialist, that's something that is descriptive enough. This is somebody who's going to be the key go-to person for your buyer to communicate with so they can start that mortgage loan application and then submit documents throughout the process to get a full loan approval. They get a pre-approval. Once they're under contract, they begin a full loan application to work their way towards approval. Home buying is intentionally slow, which is good. Nobody wants to buy a house in a day and close in the afternoon. So we're going to go through our approval process. We're going to go through the inspection of the home to make sure that it's in good condition, anything we need to negotiate. Then we're also going to go through the appraisal process. An example of a lender would be Movement Mortgage, Evolution Mortgage. All right, underwriters. So we don't interact with underwriters very much. The lender does. Whatever we are sharing with the lender, if it comes to the buyer documents and the loan application, the underwriters are doing that evaluation of the home to see if it's a good investment for their investors who are giving them the money, and then also to make sure that the buyer is approved to buy it. Settlement agents, or could be a real estate attorney. In Virginia, someone can use an attorney or a settlement agent in order to help close the home. They are going to hold the earnest money deposit in an escrow. They're going to do a title search, prepare closing paperwork, and be in communication with lenders and agents and your client to make sure that everyone can reach the settlement table or the closing table. Examples of that would be Fortis Title and, let's say, Shaheen Law. They have a copy of the contract. We're keeping them in the loop as to how things are going. So our staff that's here to help, we have a transaction coordinator. So this is somebody that's working specifically for us and our agents. And what does that person do? They're going to handle a lot of the admin type stuff. You literally can hand over the contract with certain details, contacts as to who's going to be the settlement agent, who's the lender, who is the buyer, right? And they're going to make sure that your paperwork is compliant, that it's submitted correctly. They're going to keep all parties in an email loop to make sure that everyone knows what's going on, obtain certain documents when needed. They could even be in touch with your client to help things go smooth. So that way you can focus on your people rather than a lot of miscellaneous data. The appraiser, now the appraiser is somebody who's going to give their value of the property. It's based on sales data and it's based on their opinion. And it's important that the loan amount matches what the appraiser says the home is worth. Sometimes the appraiser believes it's worth more than what the contract price is, or it could be this appraiser could be in agreement with what the contract price is. And sometimes they may think the value is lower. And when that happens, it opens up negotiations. So the appraisal is ordered by the lender at an appropriate point in the transaction, mostly when we make it through the inspection phase. So this isn't something the buyer would order direct. The other people that are helping us through this buy side transaction would be the home inspector. There's someone who's going to examine the property. They're going to test some of the systems, electrical, plumbing, heating and air, take a look at the foundation, crawl space if there is one, trying to determine the age and the condition of the roof, you name it. And in the state of Virginia, or at least in our contracts, it also says that you need to use a home inspector that is licensed by DPOR. Can your client use something else like a contractor? Yes, they have to be licensed. And if they're going to use anyone other than a home inspector licensed by DPOR, that needs to be disclosed in the paperwork. Some of you may be new to termite moisture inspections, right? Or otherwise known as WDO, which stands for wood destroying organism inspections. These are brave individuals, and most times will crawl into a crawl space under a home. They're looking for signs of termites, wood rot, other conditions. There are a number of organisms like fungus, powder post beetles, right? So they're taking a look at that to make sure that the home is in good condition, and there's a contractual process for that. All right, so now that we know a few more of the players, right? You could be representing the buyer. There could be a listing agent representing the seller. The buyer could have a lender, and then each side, buyer and seller, each have their own settlement agent or real estate attorney helping them. The buyer is arranging inspections for home inspection and termite moisture. The lender is ordering the appraisal. The listing agent is working on repairs if that has been negotiated. So you can see just with that brief description, there's a lot going on, right? So it's always good to plan ahead. So let's say we're going to start off with our transaction process, and we're step one here. We have a ratified contract. Great news. Now it's time to get into action right away. So in that first 48 hours, you're busy. Once that is ratified, meaning all sides are in full agreement, a meeting of the minds, the contract is fully signed, all changes are initialed by buyer and seller, and all agent and signatures at the bottom of certain documents. When we have 100% of the signatures and the document has been shared, now we are ratified. And you want to make sure that all your paperwork is complete and ask for help on that. I would suggest organizing a folder on your computer to keep a lot of the documents all in one place, because there's going to be plenty between now and closing time. Your transaction coordinator will also help you out with that. Submitting the contract to the transaction coordinator will help them enter it into the document management system and start to communicate with the parties. So you want to really do that within the first 24 hours. So if it's Friday and you ratify, Saturday morning, I would get to work. Don't wait till Monday. Your client will need to submit an earnest money deposit as it states in the contract, and it's on page one. Now, that amount can vary, it can be anywhere from $500 to $1,000. I've seen earnest money deposits be $10,000 or even more. A lot of that depends on the price point that they're buying. The higher the price point, the more the earnest money deposit. So who's going to hang on to this? First class real estate doesn't hang on to earnest money deposits. We have the settlement agents do that. Now, the list side brokerage can hold it. Yes. Could the seller side real estate attorney hold the earnest money deposit? They absolutely can. We just find for efficiency that if the buyer side settlement agent is hanging on to the earnest money deposit, we've seen more positive results in that regard. Now, in the contract, it's going to state either they have paid or will pay within 48 business hours. So that's something you want to make sure you are connecting the dots. Yes, they could literally walk in and drop off a check at the settlement agent, but there are electronic means in which they can do so. Earnest money, it could be money order, personal check, certified check, or electronically transferred as well. This is when you can also provide your client with our preferred vendor list to schedule inspections. There are going to be things that they're going to need a home inspection. They're going to need homeowners insurance, termite moisture. So our vendor list has some of the preferred vendors on that. We want to make sure that the lender has a copy of the contract too. That's why leaning on the transaction coordinator, I think, is a great move because they're going to make sure things aren't missed and people aren't missed. So we just made it through the first 48 hours, right? We made sure everybody had the contract. We helped our client get the earnest money deposit in on time because if it is late or never turned in, that can terminate the transaction and our license could be in jeopardy. We could actually be reported for not making sure the earnest money deposit process happened properly. Uh, DPOR, the licensing agent, knows that those funds could be in our hands at some point. They also know that there is a promise to the other side that this money will be placed in escrow. And if it is not, the list side can terminate the transaction. You could be reported to DPOR and have a lot of questions to answer. So it's not something to take lightly. And you want to make sure that you are doing that within the contractual timeline, most often within 48 business hours. If you have questions, ask on that. So we've handed in the earnest money deposit, the transaction coordinator, or the parties involved, like settlement agents and lenders, all have the contracts. What are we doing next? The next step is the transaction process. We're going to focus on days 1 through 10. Now, this is the inspection contingency. There's a portion in the contract that says, we're going to buy this house if our inspection has favorable results or if we can negotiate repairs. Now, the timeline of the inspection contingency could be anything from a day, 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, 14 days. So, what most often is it? Most often, it's about 10 days. That seems to be a local market tolerance of the amount of time to get all the parties involved together. Now, if there's some scheduling uh, challenges, maybe 14 days is possible. If it is a competitive situation, or maybe the listing agent doesn't want the property off the market too long, because remember, there is a contract and a contingency. Most times showings either are stopped completely or few and far between. So, well, that property's off the market, buyers are making other decisions. They don't want you and your client to hold this home off the market for too long if it's not going to be the right choice for them. So, as a listing agent, I'm asking you to reduce that 10 or 14-day inspection contingency probably down to about 5 days or even 7 days. It can all get done. You just need to get right on it, right? That first 48 hours of scheduling your inspection with a home inspector licensed by DPOR. So, what are we doing in this time frame? During this inspection, we want to make sure that the home is accessible for the home inspector. Most times we do like privacy. We will ask the seller to leave, but do they have the right to stay if they want to? Yes. Do we want our buyer there for the home inspection? It's not required, but it's encouraged. And it is on you to make sure that the home inspector is able to have access to the property. Now, the seller has contractually agreed to have all the utilities on. We want to make sure that they are, because if not, that means it could be a return visit by the home inspector to test those items and also involve a reinspection fee. So what are they doing? They're going to check some of the typical maintenance stuff: electrical, plumbing, heating, air, roof. Do the windows open and close in the crawl space? They'll look at the attic. They'll look at the insulation. You name it. If it's part of a home, they're going to check it. They're going to check all the electrical receptacles. They're going to flush toilets. They're going to run the shower, and they're really looking at everything. And at this point, this is when your buyer is going to get a report that could be anywhere from 20 to 50 pages. And it will mention some of the things working out well, but it's also going to mention some things that probably need some work. This is a time where it is a very emotional time for your buyer. Your buyer chose this house because they loved it. They thought, man, my family's going to be in this house. This is going to be amazing. And then somebody just handed them 30 pages with a lot of challenges on it. So usually there is some fear and anxiety that comes in, and you want to make sure that you are not caught up in that as well. You want to make sure that you are there to let them know, hey, this is an evaluation. If we hear of problems or challenges, it's a good thing because we want to know and not be surprised later. Anything can be fixed with the right professional. And if there's any sort of safety concerns or something beyond, let's say, typical handy person type stuff, let's see if we can negotiate these repairs and come to an agreement so you get a house in good condition. So you want to make sure that you're not missing the deadlines in this. There's a lot that's happening in this 7 to 10 day period. Your client's going to begin their loan application with the lender. You're performing your inspection. And then let's say we're post inspection. There's a few things that can happen. Your buyer can review this inspection prior to the end of this contingency timeline, meaning if it ends in 10 days after ratification, and how that timeline works, if we ratified on Monday, day one is Tuesday, right? That's when we start counting. So ratification day is considered day zero, day one is Tuesday, and then we count. We don't want to wait till the last minute. If we have a 10-day inspection contingency timeline, we don't want to schedule the inspection on day 9, right? We want to schedule that day 1, 2, or 3 right away so we have enough time to evaluate this report, perhaps write up some document to request repairs, or giving the buyer time to consider if they want to move forward or not. So during this time frame, we inspect and the buyer has choices. They could either release saying, you know what, I've given it a good evaluation and this house is not for me. The other is we could say, well, let's do this. Let's write up some repairs and see what we can negotiate in the next phase of the contract to see if the seller is willing to participate. So that form is known as a property inspection contingency removal addendum. And let's move forward on this timeline. So again, prior to the expiration of the deadline, the inspection contingency deadline, and let's say it was 7 days. Prior to the expiration of 7 days, something needs to happen. And it is not the list agent's responsibility or the transaction coordinator or the settlement agent or the lender. It is totally your responsibility to be on top of those timelines. It's not even your client's responsibility. It's your fiduciary responsibility, right? You're exercising that ordinary care, right? You're watching the timeline to make sure that you know precisely when it ends to make sure everything happens within that timeline. So what should happen? And the timelines don't run until 5 o'clock at night, right? The timelines run all the way up to 11:59 p.m., the last day of the contingency. And it's a 7-day work week. So it's Monday through Sunday. It's not just Monday through Friday, unless you purposely write it in the contract that the timeline will be by business banking days. And I can't tell you that is rarely done. So about 99% of the time, you may be negotiating on a Sunday, and that is part of your value to your client to make sure that you are there when the time is needed. Okay. So prior to the end of the inspection contingency, which is super important, either one, you need to send a release that your buyer's not moving forward, or what I love to hear, let's work it out and see if we can negotiate a better outcome for your buyer. So what are we doing? We're filling out a PICRA. You'll see on the right side of the screen, the PICRA stands for Property Inspection Contingency Removal Addendum. What does that mean? Well, we had an inspection contingency, that time period of, well, we may buy it if this is satisfactory to the buyer. So the removal basically takes this contingency, just removes it from the contract so that we can move forward. When we're writing this document, it's 2 pages, mostly blank, and we are filling it full of our repair request, mostly of safety issues, significant issues, We're not asking them to turn every screw and to replace doorknobs. No, we are making sure that it is safe, that electrical, plumbing, heating, air, some of the systems such as the roof and the windows are working, things like that. Now, each loan type will have its own level of condition. If it's a VA loan, they want to make sure that there aren't holes in the wall and that there are railings if there are stairs. They want to make sure that there isn't peeling paint. They want to make sure the systems work. If it's FHA, they don't like dirty carpets or filthy floors. They want to make sure that that also doesn't have peeling paint. They want to make sure that the systems are working and that it is safe. It's not about whether it is updated to a fancy new kitchen or not. It's not about cosmetics. It's about safety and systems and the habitability of the home. So let's say we are going to fill out this property inspection contingency removal addendum. Let's say there were 10 repairs that your buyer felt that was important to you. Well, we want to make sure that we fill out this document prior to the expiration of our contingency timeline. I would really lean in and listen to this part because this is the part that a lot of agents find challenging. There are two phases when it comes to an inspection contingency. You have your initial inspection timeline of, let's say, 10 days, and then you have your negotiation period that could be anywhere from 5 to 7 days. What happens is a lot of agents get confused and they kind of mash them together and try to get it all done within the first 10 days. But this is important. After you go through your inspection contingency, let's say it's 10 days, and prior to the expiration, you decided we're going to negotiate repairs and you filled out a property inspection contingency removal, 2 pages. Sometimes we only need a little bit of space. So it doesn't mean we completely fill up 2 pages. But let's say we fill that up and we are going to request repairs. We have to send that over prior to the deadline of the inspection contingency. So if it's 7 days prior to the expiration of 7 days, we have to send this PICRA and the home inspection report over to the list side so that we can negotiate. If we did it appropriately, it starts a new timeline. So the new timeline is a negotiation period of this PICRA document. We have 5 days to negotiate. We're pretty much locked into a contract of this 5-day dance to see if we can work it out. There's a lot of nuances that are throughout this process that we'll learn in the future as far as negotiating back and forth on certain repairs, on what the seller is willing to do, what the buyer needs done, and how we can work this out. So we have a 5-day negotiation period, but let's say we haven't worked that out after 5 days. Well, now we have day 6. Now, day 6 is known as the additional day. Yep, we've got one more day to work it out. But on day 6, the buyer can say, you know what, we've tried this for 5 days and it's not going to work out. I want a release, and they have the right to do so. So day 6, you can negotiate and release. And now, let's say we're now on day 7 of this timeline. Well, day 7, the buyer can release, the seller can release, or you can continue to negotiate to an agreement. Now, if 7 days wasn't enough for whatever reason, sometimes it does extend, we can extend by mutual agreement. Most times we're really trying to work it out within that time frame to get that done because there are other things that need to happen in the future of this transaction. And remember, the top 2 things that will bog down a transaction and delay closing: the pacing of negotiation of repairs and performing those repairs. And the second is your client getting the appropriate documents and needs of the lender for their approval. Those are the top 2 things. So if we spend too much time here, we're probably going to be delaying closing. So you want to make sure that you are paying attention and really pushing through this process in order to get it done. So I'll repeat that again. We have our inspection contingency. Prior to the expiration, we have handed over our PICRA and our inspection contingency, or our inspection report. Now that opens up a new 5 to 7 day timeline. So the reason I say 5 to 7 is because sometimes we don't need all 5 days. Sometimes we work it out 2, 3 days. We ratify a PICRA just like we ratify a contract with all changes initialed agent signing the bottom line, client signing the bottom line, and we move forward. So sometimes we don't need that whole time frame, and we find agreement earlier. But if we do need that full time frame, it's going to be 5 days of negotiation. Day 6 is the additional day with negotiation or the buyer can release. Day 7, known as the expiration of the additional days in that fund, and buyer and seller can release, or you can negotiate. So moving forward, let's say we worked it out. The seller said, I looked at the inspection report and I agree, we do need to fix some of these things. They said yes to some, no to others, but with negotiation, we were able to move forward. Because if not, remember, there is a release point for the buyer and seller if we can't work out these inspection repairs. What happens if we reach the end of that PICRA negotiation and buyer and seller don't agree? Well, the buyer has an opportunity to release from the transaction. If they don't, then they were moving forward with the last known agreement. So if, let's say, they sent over this PICRA with 10 repairs and the seller agreed to 5 of them, and we're at the end of that 7 day PICRA period, and now the clock runs out and it's day 8. Well, that means that we're moving forward with agreement on those 5 out of 10 repairs that the seller said yes to. It is on the buy side, and you, as the buyer representative, to make sure something happens prior to that inspection timeline. It's either we're extending, we're agreeing to what we have so far, or we're releasing, and that is 100% on your plate to make sure that you get that done. So you can see where you have high value to your clients. They need you to guide them through this process. And to be honest with you, your clients, unless they have bought before, have no idea this is coming, right? No idea. So this is where you are really proving your high value. There could be other contingencies that are at play. It's not all about just a home inspection, what's being worked on, too. Your client may need a home that they have to sell first in order to move forward. And that is something that would have to be added to the transaction. There could be an HOA or POA, homeowners association, property owners association, or a condo association. And that is also a contingency in the contract and part of the buyer's due diligence. There could be some other inspections that aren't typical, like maybe the septic or well or pool. There could be other contingencies involved in the contract. So let's say we did work it out, and now we're going to move forward. We have ratified our property inspection contingency removal addendum. We have come to an agreement, but we're not done. There's still more investigation that's going on. So we could be around days 16 through 27 in a transaction. So you can see why there's a lot to do and why these transactions take some time. If we write a contract too short, meaning we give the lender a contract with unrealistic expectations, 30 days is average. Sometimes they go a little over 35, 40, depending on things. Now, I'd say if you were pushing the timelines, probably about 25 days is possible. If you start going below the goal of 25 days, you really want to consult with the lender to see, is that possible? You want to consult with the listing agent too. Can the seller move out in that short amount of time? So you can't just write it on the contract without the right research on whether you can really push the timeline. So let's move forward with days 16 through 27. What's happening here? At this point, the lender is most likely ordering the appraisal. That is something that is in the contract. Once you have a ratified PICRA within 3 days, or some sort of removal of the inspection contingency, because maybe they're buying as is and there is no negotiation repair, within 3 days, the lender should order the appraisal. Don't forget, that's a cost to your buyer. Make sure they're saving their money because typically that's around $600 and it's paid at the time of being ordered. Also, the settlement agent for the buy side is now ordering a title search. They want to make sure that the title is free and clear of any sort of liens, judgments, encumbrances. They want to make sure that whoever is selling the property really has ownership too. The goal is to get a clear title, a general warranty deed, and something that's known as marketable and insurable, meaning it can be sold and also it can receive title insurance, which is important and vital for your client. There'll be two title insurance policies purchased if it is financed. One will be for the lender and they require it. It protects the lender, does not protect the buyer. That's why the buyer will have their own policy. This will be among closing costs for your buyer. Now, could somebody buy without title insurance? They could, but they are really risking things because there's a lot of unforeseen things in real estate. Some sort of issue with the property lines that was undiscovered. There's some other owner of the property. There's some sort of lien or judgment that was undiscovered in the search that is tied to the property that now becomes an issue for your future homeowner. It is worth the extra few dollars to get that done. So your buyer is working with the lender continuously on their loan process. The appraisal is most likely ordered for their visit, and then the title search is going on with a settlement agent. And it's also time to order condo association or POA documents. In the state of Virginia, these documents are paid for by the seller, ordered by the list side, and delivered to the buyer. And the buyer has a 3-day right to review these documents, and it cannot be waived. So they can't close on the property without receiving these documents and say, that's okay, I don't need it, never mind. It says in the contract quite clearly that this is something that can't be waived. So you want to make sure that the list side has ordered this because it can take as much as 2 weeks to get this information back. Most times the list side will not order it until you get to the home inspection contingency. Why? Because it is a cost to the seller, and it could be anywhere from $200 to $400 to get these packages. Once your buyer does receive that package, it could be anywhere from, I'd say, um, you know, 20 to 200 pages. And they've got 3 days, 3 continuous days, not business days, to review this. If there's something that's in that condo package that they don't agree with, let's say there's some sort of assessments on the condo, everyone's going to be paying extra monthly dues because they're going to be replacing the roof on every building. Or maybe the condo financials aren't correct. Or maybe there are certain aspects of the rules of the property owners association they don't agree to when it comes to modifications to the house, or can they park their work vehicle there, or other things. So you want to make sure that they have that time to receive the packet and review, because if they don't agree, that is a point where the transaction can end within that 3-day period. So again, if it gets to day 4, day 5, it's too late. And those timelines are on your plate again. It's gotta find, they have to receive it, they have to review it, and then either move forward or not, all within those 3 days. So yes, it may be a Sunday night at 11 o'clock and your buyer saying, hey, I just found out I can't park my company work truck there and I don't want to move forward. And it doesn't wait until the next day. And you have to get into action. That's part of your value. There's another important part that happens during this day 16 to 27 period. That's where the appraiser can go out and they're going to make sure that the house is worth the purchase price on the contract. They're also going to look at certain conditional aspects. Now, they're not going to do the type of inspection that a home inspector does. It won't be that heavy, but they are going to look and see, well, does the heat turn on? Does the water run? Does the roof look like it's in good shape? Um, does the home look generally in safe condition? Are there peeling paint issues with FHA and VA loans? Are there pieces of siding that are hanging off? Are there any sort of conditional hazards? So there could be certain repairs that they ask for. And this would fall under a category in the contract that's known as the cap. It's in paragraph 13 of the purchase agreement. Why do they call it the cap? Well, this paragraph does not deal with home inspection repairs. That's a whole other negotiation and category. The cap is a pre-negotiated amount of the contract, most often 1% of the purchase price. So if they're buying it for $300,000, $3,000 is basically negotiated, pre-negotiated between seller and buyer up front. For these type of repairs would be termite moisture, appraisal repairs, or well and septic. So remember when we talked about who's who? Well, the appraisal is going to be testing the value to make sure that it's worth that, but could have some of those issues that I mentioned as far as safety of the home. And then termite moisture, you're going to have somebody who's looking for wood rot, wood destroying organisms, termites, things like that. Now, if the home is on a slab, it may have less termite moisture issues compared to something on a crawl space, but every house can get termites, right? That's why they do an inspection. And these repairs sometimes are minor, a few $100s. Sometimes they can go over this 1%. So the termite moisture appraisal related repairs are most often tied to those are necessary in order for the home to be approved for a loan. Termite moisture, certainly for a VA loan, it is required by a VA loan, a Veterans Association or a Veterans Affairs loan, right? To make sure that for that VA buyer, they have a clear termite moisture report in order to close on the loan. If not, then the bank's not going to approve it. FHA and conventional, it is optional, but if it's in the contract, then it needs to be done. The appraisal will have possible issues. If it's a home that might be outside the city limits, there's a chance they're drinking water from a well. Is it something that's safe for human consumption? Or could be a septic tank? And is that something that is in good working order and will have its own inspection? So you can see that 1% of the purchase price, that money could evaporate pretty quickly with some of these repairs if they start adding up. We've seen some where it's only been a few $100s. We've seen ones where it's been thousands and thousands of dollars. So paying attention to the condition of the home before you make an offer is important. Because if you see a home with a lot of deferred maintenance and a lot of issues and is a real fixer-upper, and you have somebody who has a VA loan or an FHA loan, you may be up to a real challenge to get this done. A conventional loan is a little bit more um, liberal on the condition. It can have some bumps and bruises and most likely can pass the appraisal. So this 1% is negotiable. If you are, let's say, going to a home outside the city limits and you know there's well and septic and it's an older home and we want termite moisture, can it be 1.5 or 2%? Absolutely. I've seen some negotiated down to 0%. Most often you want to at least have that 1% in there because it comes up quite a bit. And if it goes over that 1%, it opens negotiations. The seller can pay for it. The buyer actually, a lot of times, can pay for that stuff if it's allowed by their lender, or somehow the sides may be able to work out something in the middle in order to get that done. So, this is an important part of the contract. And we've been through that whole home inspection contingency. We got through the PICRA phase. Remember the 5, 7 days where we're negotiating the transaction. And sometimes this could be a real challenge that we did not expect, except for you being the educated professional that was planning for 3, 4 steps ahead. And you knew we're not going to pop any champagne yet because I need to make sure I get my buyer through this important phase of the title search, owners association documents, if they're there, termite moisture, and then it's negotiated as to who's going to order their report, whether it's buyer or seller. When our next session, when we're making an offer, we'll go over this paragraph. All right, let's say we worked our way through that. We had an agreement on repairs. The appraiser came, the value was good. We didn't have to renegotiate that. Okay, let's say termite moisture report was clear, meaning no wood rot, no sign of active termites or wood destroying organisms, fun stuff like fungus, not mold, fungus is different. And we've got a clear letter. There was no property owners association, so we didn't even have to deal with that. And let's say that the Title came in clear. Great. We're heading in the right direction. We're still working though, right? So we reach pending, and each state may have different phases in a contract in which they would go pending. Let's say North Carolina, as soon as you're under contract, you're straight to pending, right? Here in our area, we are contingent as we work through contingencies. And when we remove all contingencies, we are now pending. The only contingency that would remain pending is loan approval. Your buyer's financing, and it doesn't always have to be financing. There are plenty of cash transactions. It would surprise you how many cash transactions there are. But your buyer's financing is a contingency to the contract, because if their loan is denied, then at that point, if they acted in good faith, they would receive their earnest money back and the transaction is over. So if we are pending now, we've removed contingencies, what's happening? Your client will need to submit those final documents to the lender. Yep, they're still asking for stuff. And you want to make sure that the listing agent is getting on top of those repairs, because they're busy too. And we don't want those repairs to lag behind and delay our closing. The lender is going to be working with the settlement agent and preparing a closing disclosure. This is something that discloses to your buyer what their interest rate will be, what their monthly payment will be, what certain fees they may be paying at closing. There's a few other closing documents, such as a HUD. Now, a HUD statement is more if it's a cash transaction. So, closing disclosure if financed, HUD statement if it is a cash transaction. Ultimately, buyer and seller are going to be signing something which is known as an ALTA, ALTA, right? So it's a American Land and Title Association, right? And that's going to be a final statement that shows the fees or credits on both sides with buyer and seller signing. So this closing disclosure, there will be one that is sent to your buyer, and it's important that they sign it electronically a few days before closing, because there is a 3-day review period for this closing disclosure by law. Now, they're going to get plenty of disclosures up front. They're going to get an initial fee estimate, a good faith estimate. They're going to get disclosures from their mortgage lender, but a few days away from closing, they'll get a closing disclosure that is more specific as to what is going to happen at the closing table fee-wise and what that payment and interest rate will be. They do have a chance to review this and also sign it. And it's important because if they don't, it could delay closing. So the settlement company will complete its title search, obtain clear title, communicate with the lender in order to work on these closing documents. You want to make sure that your client, here in the home stretch, is still doing what they need to do. All right. They need to keep money in their bank. They need to keep their credit clear, almost as if it is frozen. Stop using the card, stop buying stuff, right? Don't go out and open any sort of furniture store credit cards. Don't buy a new car. It will nuclear bomb your home loan or any other credit cards. Lay low, keep the credit cards in your pocket, save your money. That's the best thing to do. Then, right after closing, sure, go buy at the whole furniture store. If there's any problems, make sure that you or coach your client to talk to the lender right away. If they've gotten some sort of new collection letter, or if there's some sort of problem, don't hide in the dark. Tell the lender right away so they can get to work on things. And you also need to make sure that you're paying attention during this time frame, right? And this may sound crazy, but you do have to remind your client, hey, make sure you don't change your job or quit your job. Because close to settlement, the lender is going to make sure that they're still working, and they're also going to check credit one more time. So you want to make sure that everything is going to be smooth sailing. All right, let's say you're a week out from closing. There's a few things that you can do here. You don't want to check out or tune out. You want to stay engaged and make sure all your hard work helps your client and then also helps your income, right? So what are we doing? Checking with the lender. Is there anything that the lender needs? Is everything going well? Your transaction coordinator will help you through this process too. They are there from ratified all the way to closing, but it is also on you to make sure that, okay, is the buyer doing what they need to do with the lender? Sometimes they're working with a lender familiar with us, one of our vendors, and we have a good rapport and relationship. Sometimes they're working with an outside lender that we're not as familiar with, so the communication isn't quite there. And we may not know if there's a problem because that lender is not communicating. And that's why trusted vendors have your back on these transactions. As the appraisal come in, sometimes they take a while. FHA can be up to 10 days, VA could be up to 14 days. So that's why you want to, again, work your way through that inspection contingency, negotiate repairs so that appraisal can be ordered and you can stay within that timeline that you wrote in the contract. Now, in the contract, there is an automatic 10-day extension for two reasons, which would be one, the title needs more processing or the loan needs more processing. That doesn't mean that the contract will be extended 10 days because the buyer can't get a moving truck on Saturday, right? It's loan processing, such as the appraisal being in, and then title processing, such as trying to make sure it's a clear title. You can extend closing by mutual written agreement if it is needed. Do they have a copy of the clear turbine moisture letter? So you're making sure that all these things that happen as far as termite moisture check, the appraisal, that these things come in so that we've checked all the boxes. We want to confirm with the listing agent that the repairs are done. The sellers, they're okay on their move out. Can we get some copies of the invoices? We want to prove someone showed up to do the work that we negotiated. Remind your buyers, hey, you may want to call and schedule utilities for closing day. All right. They'll either be turned on or transferred into their name because they don't want to go close on a Friday and go all weekend without what? Water, gas, electricity, right? So the sellers, they're going to try to turn it off as soon as they can. And you want to make sure that your buyers don't go without utilities. It can easily be missed. And that's why it's part of your checklist to make sure that you remind them. And in our presentations, we do have a moving checklist to help you out. So we're going to schedule closing with a settlement agent. And you want to make sure that your buyers know where they're going and when. You want to make sure that they are showing up with a photo ID to prove who they are, that if they needed to bring funds to closing, that is either arranged by wire with a settlement agent or a certified check with the amount that they need. So as I mentioned, that closing disclosure within 3 days of closing, that's when the lender is going to send it to the buyer to sign. And what we're listening out for is we're listening for clear to close. Clear to close means that it has survived through underwriting and now we're ready to close within the 24, 48 hours. This close, right? We've made it through the marathon. So, what you want to make sure, though, is you look at the closing disclosure. Is the commission correct? Is your transaction fee correct? Was a home warranty ordered for the buyer? Is it on there? Whether the buyer was paying or the seller was paying, you want to make sure that was if there was anything that was supposed to be on that closing disclosure as far as an invoice paid, home warranty, your commission, transaction fee, that it's there because once it closes, it closes. And once that book is closed, it's extremely hard to open it up. Once everyone leaves the settlement table, that's it, it's done. And chasing people down to pay a few $100 is very challenging. So you want to make sure that everything is correct. And that is on you to review that. That's part of your professionalism. Now, moving forward, there's going to be a final walkthrough. It's in the contract. The final walkthrough basically states that we have a chance to see the home, that either buyer or seller will have utilities on. Most times it's the seller. That about 24, 48 hours prior to closing, we're going to check to make sure that the home, as it states in the contract, is substantially in the same condition as the day offer was written, and that any negotiated repairs are completed. Now, what does that mean? Substantially in the same condition. I'll give you an example. Um, you showed up and you wrote an offer in the day, and all the windows were intact. You show up on walkthrough, and one of the neighborhood kids threw a rock through a window. That needs to be fixed because you're not buying a house You didn't agree to buy a house with a broken window. Or what about the appliances? You checked off in the contract that this refrigerator is going to come with a contract. And you show up and the sellers moved and they took the refrigerator with them. That's something you need to protect your client on. Or there were repairs. Let's say the hot water heater wasn't turning on. You turned it on and there was no hot water. So it was negotiated in your PICRA, your property inspection contingency removal, to make sure that this water heater is working properly. You show up on walkthrough day and there's no hot water. So there could be last minute problems to diagnose, but again, when the home closes, it is considered as is. But when the buyer is doing this walkthrough, you absolutely want to do a walkthrough. They want to see the home one more time prior to closing because, again, once it's closed, it is almost impossible to go backwards to try to get money or repairs unless there was something in writing agreed that after closing, known as post closing or paid outside of closing, that we are going to get something fixed. The plumber can't make it by Friday. We're closing on Friday. The buyer's got to move in. He can't show up for the water heater. What are we going to do? Maybe we have a mutually signed agreement between buyer and seller and the agents that Sam, the plumber, is going to show up on Saturday morning and fix the water heater, and the sellers have already set aside funds for it. So we can diagnose and fix problems, but we want to really make sure before we close that we have as few to perhaps no problems at all before we sign on the bottom line, because after closing, it is very difficult to fix things. So again, is the home substantially in the same condition during this walkthrough? Have the repairs been done? Are the utilities on so we can test things? Because the buyer will be there flipping on some switches, turning on the ceiling fan, checking the water, flushing some toilets, turning on the shower, testing the garage door opener, some of the basics, not doing a full home inspection, but making sure that those items listed on a walkthrough report, and there are plenty, are generally working. Now, can the home inspector come back and re-inspect certain things? Yes, they can. There's typically a cost, can be anywhere from $100 to $200 to have them come back and do a re-inspection on behalf of the buyer. And what are they looking for? They're looking for negotiated repairs. What did we negotiate in that property inspection contingency removal addendum that was agreed upon? And that is the scope in which they can examine. They can't find new issues to be negotiated. So at this point, you communicate with the listing agent and say, is it okay if we take the keys? Right. So at this point, you can take the key and hold on to it until closing. If you don't trust yourself or you're going out of town or something like that, you can give the key to the settlement agent and say, hey, I can't make Tuesday's closing because I'm taking a trip to Hawaii. And I would say, don't miss your closings, right? Schedule a Hawaii trip the day after, but make sure that your buyers have access to that key. Do not give your clients the key until you're legally allowed to do so. If you give the keys too early prior to closing to your buyer, they're going to get excited. They're going to show up in the house. And it seems like in the universe of real estate, listing agents just know when someone's in a house and they're not supposed to be there. And that can get you in a lot of trouble. So you want to make sure that you have communicated with a listing agent that is okay to hang out of that key. Most listing agents will say yes. Most closing situations, you can hand it to your buyer at closing. There are some listing agents that do not want you to hand over the key until it is recorded, the deed recorded. So what's the timeline of that? Let's say we close on Monday. We're at the settlement agent. We have signed forms. Most likely that is going to be closed or recorded rather with local officials, city, courthouse, things like that. The deed being recorded the next day. And then that's when these files are funded, meaning that's when your commission's dispersed and things like that. So there could be certain listing agents that will say, not until it's recorded. You just have to pay attention to the specifics on that. So on closing days, I'm a big fan of you going to your closings. There are some agents who will act like it's no big deal if you're too busy. Now, to be honest, on closing day and actually right at settlement, there's not a whole lot for us to do, right? If we have not reviewed the closing disclosure, this is the time we certainly want to do it because your buyer is going to be signing a lot of paperwork. But you are there to be supportive. You help them through this challenging 30-day journey to make it there. This is a big achievement for your buyer or seller. And yes, there could have been stressful days. There could have been days when they were full of anxiety and they might have been a little difficult to deal with, and they really needed your guidance and your emotional stability to help them get to that closing table. Remember, you do have to keep that clear mind all the way to the end because your client is relying on you to be a representative. And if you cannot control your own emotions or your communication or act professional, you're not serving your client. You are there to protect your client through the process. And at closing day, this is an opportunity. Remember, your client shows up with a photo ID, and they also have certified funds, if not wired funds, that the settlement agent will need. This is when you got the key, didn't forget it at home, right? And the settlement agent will do 99% of the work if it is closing at some location other than a settlement office. Let's say your client happens to be in another state, the use of a authorized notary can be used in order to get that done. Your client will sign the paperwork, hand over those keys if allowed, and make it a day, right? Take a photo, maybe it is a reasonable gift, ask for reviews and referrals. This is when everybody can take a deep breath because you made it. Now you may be saying, hey, this is great. So when do I receive that commission that I earned? And most times after the home records, that's when the settlement agent is dispersing funds. And then typically within about 24, 48 hour, that's when you're going to get your commission electronically. So there's a lot to it. And a lot of this comes down to preparation. And that's why you don't want to wait till you even have a client. This is something you want to study now. You want to look at that home buyer guide as a way to educate yourself on how to paraphrase this home buying process. Why? Because your client's not going to sit through an hour training just like you did, right? But there are ways within a few minutes that we can get them tuned in as to, hey, here's the road ahead. Here's how you can financially get prepared, and then also get pre-approved. And I'm going to help you through all of this. And this is why I'm super relevant. And then the transaction process is something that you can always look 3, 4 steps ahead and know what timelines and deadlines you got to know and what you need to prepare for in advance.